We are live.
I don't know if we're alive, but we're in color.
Well, I guess that's half the battle then.
It is. It is. So we're a couple days late, but we needed to.
Let the dust settle, as it were.
Yes, the dust is settling. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, like most things in life, it'll be one of those things that we'll look back and say, we thought it was done, but maybe it's not.
This is the 11th of January, 2026. One of the first episodes of our 5th year doing this. Did you know that?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. And we're not getting younger. You realize that?
Yeah, I think that's probably just a problem with age.
Yes. Are we aging like cheese ages?
Wine, cheese, all the good things in life.
So what do you think of the past week's screw-ups?
Well, I said it a little bit before we went on live that I'm getting tired. And I'm getting tired of the right versus the left versus the right. We're right, you're wrong. No, you're wrong, I'm right. Come on, folks. We're sounding more and more and more like a bunch of kindergarten kids that can be emulated by looking at C-SPAN. We're actually no better in many respects than the politicians that are sitting in the ones who are supposedly the best and the brightest, or at least the best that want the jobs that they're there for. And in reality, I think kindergarten classes have way more class and structure than what the politicians do. And they are the ones that are kind of throwing the stick in the spokes, or trying their darndest to keep us divided. What's the old adage? Divide and conquer? I don't know. It's becoming very tiresome to me.
Yeah. It's been a pretty challenging week for any positivity on the scene.
Yeah.
I don't see people, at least in my neighborhood, being pumped up over how the new year went, and the prognosis for our leadership collectively is pretty low. Although apparently, according to the Toronto Star, which is very good birdcage liner, the fellow Dark Blarney is doing very well. He's him and the elbows up crowd is just unbelievably popular.
That's right, 80% approval rating, the best it's ever been held in 15 years in Canada. Now, did they just talk to 80 people? We never find out the true numbers on these things, and never really find out when the poll was done and who did the polling. And
well, first,
no, it's not me, because if I look at a number and it says suspected scam, I never answer it. So,
well, I'm not sure if I would take that sort of poll for anything more than birdcage liner. But look, even a dyed-in-the-wool liberal like Warren Kinsella this morning said that the opposition leader is not going anywhere. They're not going to kick him out. And the truth of the matter is the Liberals are running out of runway for stealing people from the opposition with bribery, or getting any results for the myriad of MOUs they've signed over the past 10, 11 months, which have amounted nothing more than more trees cut down to make the paper that they signed. The geopolitical situation globally, they keep hitching their wagon to a losing team over and over again, and then making excuses for their inadequacies.
That's true. Yeah. But we deep down inside, we do know that it's Harper's fault here in Canada.
Oh, absolutely. Harper missed the boat.
Well, that's right. I mean, just it's. I forget which comedian it was that said something about when we have elections, we change politicians the way we change babies' diapers, and for the exact same reason.
Yeah.
And I guess the point on this is the current government has reached saturation point. You can only blame things that go back 15 years for so long without showing some proof that things are getting better. Yeah, and I did see, the state-run media here is now saying, "Oh, the spring, the economy's going to turn around in the spring." Maybe it will. I just don't know what year.
Which spring?
The spring. That's right.
Well, the truth is nobody cares about what happened last year with the auto workers. Their jobs are gone. Nobody cares what happened to the pulp workers. Their jobs are gone. Nobody cares about the canola that's rotting in the silos in the West. It's not going anywhere. And it's all forgotten. It's all current screw ups that the media focuses on in Canada and finds ways to fence off any challenge to the narrative that comes out of the elbows up base of the Liberal Party and some of the hangers on from the NDP. In fact, the only people politically that are getting any traction at the moment, I think, is the NDP, because people are coming to the conclusion that if you really want to be a lefty, it's not the Liberals, because they're going to throw you under the bus if it's in their interest to stay in power. Mm-hmm. So, there's a very strange kind of situation in this country where we talked about this in pre-production, that about 30% of the population runs 70% of the show. This is ungainly, really, for the future to go ahead. At the time that the socialist liberals and the central planning in that bunch worries about how they're going to hitch their wagon to China or to the European Union to save Canada. These are both the dumbest things you can possibly do, but they see it as the most brilliant thing you could possibly do, because they're going to, as you said, put a stick into the spokes of the U.S. with this, and we're going to teach them a lesson. When you hear, and I'm not even sure if it's AI generated nonsense or if it's true, about we're going to oppose any action of the U.S. in Greenland, and I'm thinking, and what exactly is Carney and his gang supposed to do if Washington sits down in serious discussions with Denmark and Greenland? What are you going to do? Are you going to send
or aging F-15s and there's 3 troops somewhere?
I mean, this is so stupid. And the weak-kneed response to the Maduro case in Venezuela, this is really really dumb. And right now, as the situation in Iran, because every week that we talk, something new pops up, which is important to this discussion. Right now, it looks like there's serious trouble brewing in Iran. And is it the resurgence of Persia in Iran to get rid of the theocracy that's run that place since Jimmy Carter times? That's interesting. And I noticed not much commentary out of Ottawa and our genius foreign minister in charge of global affairs. Other than platitudes about making sure that we support the people of Iran. Well, what are you talking about? 2 weeks ago that you were talking about the stabilization of the situation in the Middle East and supporting Iran because the Iranians were backing the Palestinians. Now that the Iranians are shooting their own people in the back of the head, apparently, if we're to be believing the reports out of that part of the world right now, they've had over 1,000 people killed. Okay, because that theocracy is not going to go quietly into the night. And so if there is really an organic revolution taking place to kick out the Islamists and bring back, whatever the Persians think is going to be their new government. Next
venture into whatever.
Well, they're not going to bring back the Shah, I don't think, but it's probably, the theocracy there has run its course. And when you get people like Starmer and Merz in Germany talking about, we got to pay attention to what's going on there because it could be an upheaval. What they're doing is they're protecting their backsides because they know that if Iran goes and kicks out the Islamic fundamentalists, all their arguments around the Gaza situation goes up in smoke, because the only reason Palestine and the whole Gaza mess was sustained as long as it was because of Iran. Now, if Iran goes up in smoke, so to speak, then they got a lot of splaining to do, Lucy. And they know this.
Yeah. Well, and again, just thinking if Iran kicks out the theocracy, as you say, and embraces a monarchy or embraces democracy or whatever it is, there were an awful lot of people that were on the news broadcasts over the last couple of days that we've seen of people who are saying, if that was the case, I'd be leaving Canada and going back to Iran. Again, the same thing with the Argentinians, right? I mean, I'd leave here because I could go back to my home country.
You mean the Venezuelans?
Venezuela, yeah. I don't know why I got that mixed up.
Anyway, A is at the front of the alphabet. Argentina, Venezuela's at the end of the alphabet. And there's a whole bunch of countries in between, all throughout South America, to do the same thing. So it's okay.
Yeah. My apologies for my South American ignorance on that. I get this fixation. It's kind of like the passport thing, but we then have the people that are in the United States now that are afraid of the crackdown on this and the crackdown on that, and apparently, if you believe the matrix that are coming out, more and more of the LGBTQ crowd are making claims about how they can leave the United States and which countries would they go to, and this is after you basically run the ramparts of why don't you go and try I don't know, Palestine. Why don't you try there? You've been fighting for their liberation for a long time. They're liberated. Why don't you go and immigrate there? Don't come to Canada. Don't go to the
Yeah, well, I think there's probably people of Cuban descent that are already thinking that if Venezuela is brought back into some kind of normalcy and the socialists and the communists are gone, lots of people of Cuban descent will think Cuba's going to dry up on the vine because Venezuela kept them going. Mm-hmm. Maybe I can move back to Cuba.
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay. And Venezuelans can say, well, especially if you're from the previous era, that is the pre-Chavez time, Venezuela was a prospering, rich country. So that crowd who would now be in their 40s and 50s, who are living in Canada or the U.S. or wherever, they may go back. I also think there's a real renaissance of American hegemony taking place in the Western Hemisphere that we weren't paying attention to very much in Canada, because we first of all, we were spoiled by the Americans because they never really gave a damn about Canada. I mean, that pink part on the map, they're so nice. They don't cause us any problem. They don't do very much, but then they don't get in our way, and they do come down to Arizona and California and Florida and spend their money. They're so nice. It turns out we're not so nice at the moment to a lot of people in the administration.
Well, and again, it's that very small percentage of people that if you ask the average Canadian up here, they would think right now that the United States is probably more right-leaning Republican than they think should be. I'd like to say, and we've said it before many times, we like to think that the U.S. thinks the same way with us, but the reality is that I don't even think they consider us the pink mass anymore. We're completely overlooked.
Yes.
We had a military that in the Second World War in particular, and that's only because that's more relevant to me. I understand that a little bit more than I do the First World War, simply because of the number of years that have gone by. But we had all the military that went in and fought heroically, ferociously. Not to say that our forces right now wouldn't do the same thing, but we're overlooked. We're not even, we can't even decide what kind of airplane we're going to buy, for God's sake, without making some excuses of, well, we can't buy American, well, we can't buy European, we can't buy. Why can't we just get to a point and say, this is the decision, this is what we're going to buy, this is what we're going to do, and get our military back to where it's supposed to be? A force that could do something if push came to shove.
The Mexican government said it's hard to do business with Canada because they can't make up their minds on what they want to do. All they create is rules and regulations and red tape. Exactly. Why should that's just keeping in character. And again, as we started off this particular broadcast, Harper could have fixed that, and he didn't do that either. It was a holding pattern that unfortunately we were in, which was okay.
Well, and it goes. I think that also goes and explains an awful lot of what's going on with the people in Canada that are not going to Florida and not going to Arizona, not going to California, because all of a sudden we're not special anymore.
That's right.
Well, we never were special. Let's face it.
I think we were. That's right. We were deluding ourselves in many ways because of the ease with which you crossed the border, going back decades. That we were special. We were just not seen as any kind of threat. Okay, so that's why I think there was a false sense of specialness built into that relationship.
Well, there is, yeah. And over the last, I want to say 15 years, but probably longer, we have lost control of who comes into this country. And as a result of that, we are no longer special, in air quotes. We are no longer the good people up there who say sorry, and even if we run into you, it's our fault. We'll say sorry, blah 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 blah. And that was our culture, and it's not our culture anymore. And as a result, we are now being targeted with the same swath of paintbrush that the rest of the world is being painted in.
The classic example is that on the first of the year, the 30-day rule came into effect. That if you go to the States and you want to stay more than 30 days, you have to apply for a permit, get your picture taken, your fingerprints done, or you can't stay more than 30 days. And that applies to everybody. In the old days, a lot of rules like that only applied to people outside of Canada, as far as Americans were concerned. Okay, well now we're not seen as special anymore. We're not. In fact, we're not seen as America Light anymore by a lot of the pundits and certainly the political class. because we have managed to start to look very different in both our makeup and in our political and economic structure than we did before. We're now sort of a weird hybrid that has no real sort of flavor or purpose to from the American perspective, because they saw us as kind of the junior partner, and now we're not even that. We're kind of some alien a society that's evolved rather quickly. In fact, I wouldn't even say it's an evolution. It's within the last 5-6 years, we've completely changed our approach. So when the Americans look at the whole demographic makeup of their northerly neighbor, they don't see the United States as a junior partner or as a reflection of the society that is to the north of them. It's kind of an alien bunch, which doesn't have the same characteristics as they used to have. Now I'm talking from probably a right of center American looking at it, because if you're a far left Democrat type, then this is great, because Canada's starting to look like the new mayor of New York, what he's trying to create there. Canada's been a socialist leading place for a long time. Okay, now the expansion of that socialist thinking has basically been on steroids now for like the last 5-6 years, and the demographics prove it. And my dog is even agreeing with me. What can I say?
Everybody's got a voice now, Tom.
Yeah. But anyway, apologies to our listeners. My dog has her opinion on this, and if you speak dog, you'll probably notice it's probably the same. But seriously, the issue is clear that we are playing a kind of a silly game with a group that has its own problem. Let's not kid ourselves. Things are not hunky dory south of the border. There's business in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, both from the perspective of the immigration removal issue and the fraud from the billions of dollars that ended up in Somalia. These are messy political issues.
Oh, it is. Yeah, there's no question about that. The whole. We talked about it before. Now we've got this whole thing with the magician trying to get us to look at the right hand so that we can do something else with the left hand. And we as a population have just come so used to that we zero in on whatever we're told to zero in on. We don't do any cognitive thinking. We don't do any investigations on our own. We just listen to the media platforms, and if you're a right-leaner, you listen to the right side of the media platform. If you're a left-leaner, you lean to the left side. And if you like to think that you're in the middle somewhere, you're kind of stuck. You don't know who to believe. And as you mentioned before,
yeah, hang on a second.
Is this AI? Is it the AI generation is going on? Is it not going on? I don't know. It's such a tumultuous times that we're in. Who do you believe? I don't know. My answer has always been, if it looks too real, it's got to be AI. This is not a normal situation.
No. Well, and it muddies the waters for those of us who are trying to kind of figure out where we go as a junior partner in the Western Hemisphere here. We're a big partner, but we're still the junior partner. If geopolitically the United States, and this will go beyond the current Trump administration. This is clearly they're not. There's a movement away from being the policeman of the world. It's really quite, because if they were going to do that, they would be much more engaged with dealing with China, not from a defensive perspective, but in an offensive perspective. And that's not what they're doing. They're basically saying, you know what, we're going to build our own industries, our own chips, we want to wean ourselves off from China. We're not going to bomb them into oblivion. We're just going to move away from them. I think the Europeans don't grasp this at all. Particularly when it comes to the whole business of Ukraine and Russia. There's no strategic interest for the United States, as in the case of Canada either, in Ukraine. What strategic interest do you have? None. These are two Slavic peoples who've been at each other for 1,000 years. Don't get involved in that mess. And so this is so. I think there's probably a realization, and maybe even I would say a healthy one, that we should stop being the policeman to the world. We should clean up our own, stay in our own backyards, by the way, and tell anybody who wants to mess around our own backyards that if you come here, we're going to kick your butt. And I think that's what's happened in the case of Venezuela. And there's one other thing about Venezuela, which I'm sure will annoy some of our Ottawa types, about how they're stealing the oil and the infrastructure in Venezuela. I'd like to point out to these geniuses, if they would bother to open a history book, that Venezuela nationalized American oil industry, during the Chavez years. The Texacos, the BPs, that's British, by the way, the Chevrons, these are American companies.
Shell, yeah.
They were there since the 20s. When the commies took over in Venezuela, they basically stole that stuff. So no one's stealing anything from Venezuela. They're just simply taking it back. If shoe was on the other foot with these geniuses in Ottawa who whine about this, I'm quite sure they would say, well, that's not right. Of course it's not right. Okay? So, we're living in some pretty turbulent times in this hemisphere. And I think that we better, as Canadians, we better look at this hemisphere and stop worrying about what's going on in China or what's going on in Iran or what's going on in Europe, and making deals halfway around the world, people who don't care about us. Okay? We better start worrying about the people who probably don't care about us that much either, but they can really kick us in the butt if we don't figure out how to deal with them from a position of strength.
And I do think that we have to, at some point, also start to look at other trade partners.
Oh, sure.
And that's fair game. But I guess, too, the other side of that issue is you mentioned the U.S. is coming back into the Western Hemisphere. And it's got the people in the United Nations all worried now, with sitting back and saying, oh my goodness, the U.S. isn't going to do this, they're not going to be part of that. Well, it doesn't really matter, they're a signatory, so they still owe us money. Well, I'm kind of thinking that, you must be smoking some pretty wacky tobacco if you think that's going to happen. So,
well, yeah. Well, one of the realities of our situation is that most of our problems were created by our pals to the south. Most of our problems are created by ourselves for a long time, even before that failed drama teacher took over. Even before.
Well, again, a little, probably know the answer to this, but we have seen the enemy, and he is us.
Yes. We go back, I think, to the 60s, 70s, where we were quite able to do things on our own. We did have what we talked about in one of our episodes was the branch plan economy. We had companies that made stuff for Canada. They weren't designed to make stuff for the U.S. or anybody else. They might have been an American branch plant company, but we made those cars, those soups, those nuts and bolts for Canada. And there are a lot of little side stories that disappear into history, but the Robertson screw is one of those Canadian stories that has a very interesting connotation, or about how Canada came up with a screw which was better than the Phillips or slotted or whatever. And, it was in every Canadian household. And we put together stuff from cars to houses with Robertson screws. And that was a success story. And we did. And what happened to that? Well, we still make them, and it's still the best, screw if you're going to put it in wood or into steel or what have you. But we missed the boat on that when it came to selling it to the States, because it was a patent thing. And so we didn't, there was a strength that we gave away. But that's a very minor kind of on the side thing. Just
it is.
But it shows, that we, instead of being innovative, we created rules. We created red tape, as the Mexicans have accused us of doing, which is, by the way, why the Mexicans will do their own thing with the Americans and really don't care about us. And by the way, that also is not a bad thing, because the Mexicans are going to have enough trouble with our pals to the south over the whole drug business and how they are intertwined with the cartels, with the Venezuelans and whatever. So it's best we stay out of that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you got to think, at some point we're going to have to learn to get up out of a wheelchair and start walking again, and start being innovative and doing things and taking back some things. And to quote the current prime minister, there's going to be some hard times here, and we are going to have to do that. But it's the fact that we've let things slide for so long that it's kind of like a house spring cleaning. You got so much junk in your place, you just don't know where to start. And that's where we're kind of at. We've got lots of fingers in the fire and sticks to poke at, but we just don't know where we want to focus our attention right now. What do we do? Do we go with the Griffin fighter because it's going to guarantee us 10,000 jobs, which is, I think, a lot of malarkey, because I don't think there's 10,000 people that make Griffin jets in Europe.
That's true.
Do we demand that the U.S. put 10,000 jobs for the F-35s in Canada?
But I'll remind people listening that we've already invested billions in the F-35 program. Why wouldn't we just
anyway?
Look, the whole history of Canada is north-south on trade. That's just the way geography did it. One famous liberal prime minister called Laurier said something to the effect that we're stuck with the Americans. The geography's made us neighbors, history has made us allies, and that's just the way it is. Okay, there's nothing wrong with diversification, but you can't take reality and turn it into some thing that is impossible to achieve. Okay, it's just not good. The reality is, we have a ribbon of people from the Atlantic to the Pacific, 100 miles north, if you will, or 120 kilometers north of the 49th parallel of the Great Lakes. That's it. The rest of it is real estate. And by the way, this current administration of Canada treats us like real estate anyway. It doesn't treat it as a nation, because they already said we're not a nation anymore. Okay, this is just real estate. And while they're running around trying to do whatever in Brussels or in Beijing, that nobody asked them to do, by the way, we asked them to make a deal with the number one partner and the only neighbor we got, and they haven't done that. Okay, other than piss them off, and then when they go down to Washington, they kiss the ring. I don't understand it, but I digress for a second. The point is, there are realities that we have to deal with and make lemons into lemonade with that reality. Okay? And that's it. Okay? We have natural resources, we have smarts, we have capacity that has to be harnessed, and we can go toe to toe in sector by sector with whoever. And Americans love competition. Okay? So we'll compete. And whether it's dairy and cheese and milk, or cars, or mining, or pulp and paper. We got to pick our spots and do it.
Mm-hmm.
But this flailing about with China and India and Malaysia and this is all nice projection into the future. But trust me, nobody sits around in Kuala Lumpur or in Brussels worrying about what Canada's doing. Okay?
No. Yeah, you're right there. Yeah. And I guess to go back to a previous point we made in this broadcast, we thought we were special. We never were special, but we thought we were special. But the only way that we're going to get that back is to wake up and smell the coffee. We have to, as you said, be competitive. We have to get back onto the level. We will never be an A team as far as the stuff that goes on with the U.S. But we also have to realize that there are Cinderella stories out there where, Jack and the Beanstalk, he took on a big guy and won. Cinderella, actually had the slipper that fit. So we shouldn't sell ourselves short. Maybe we are overlooking some niche that would really, really boost or benefit us with the United States that we could do that they can't. Get us back on that friends kind of side of things, not adversaries, not. I don't know.
Well, you're right, but the fact is, what we have been doing for the last 30 years is not working. That
Mm-hmm.
model is dead.
Well, that ship sailed.
That's right. And now we have, it's not just a fork in the road with respect to sovereignty and all that. It's a whole mindset as to, what relationship do you want to have with the world going forward. If we're going to be looking at an adversarial position with a superpower next door and line ourselves up with their enemies, this is not a good idea. This will not work. Okay? It's just not going to work. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter.
No.
The United States and 360 million people aren't going to move, and the 35, 40 million, whatever number the census really proves in this country, we're not going anywhere either. Okay, so we have to make we have to make this lemon into lemonade, and I think it's very possible to do a deal like Carney promised, where there's going to be some give and take here in order to get the deal going. You can't just say we're not going to move an inch on dairy. We're not going to move an inch on steel. We're not going to move an inch on softwood. Like these are stupid ideas that haven't worked for us in 30, 40 years. So throw those aside, and then let's compete. I have no problem with having an open border, and I have to compete with Americans on anything. Okay? Because, by the way, they're not going to all get into a car and drive into Canada if there's no border. Any more than Canadians will, except for the ones that want to be in the south for the winter, going south. But, I mean, there's some serious misconceptions about what happens when you have a real, not just an illusory free trade agreement, but a real free trade agreement that includes labor mobility, that includes sharing of resources, that includes sharing of defenses and foreign policy. That's a real free trade agreement. It doesn't give up sovereignty. You still have your seat in the UN, okay? There'll be limitations, obviously, on it, just like there are limitations within the European Union of those people, of those countries, rather, to belong to that particular grouping of countries. Which, by the way, has, I think, probably 5 years before it falls apart into smaller blocks, because, I think that is a great experiment that has gone off the tracks, because they're trying to put too many square pegs into round holes, and it just isn't working. And you pointed out during pre-production about an article written about the whole banking system in the European Union. How it's crazy that basically you're playing with play money. There is no banking system there, and it will fail probably within the decade. So you've got basket cases of economies like Italy, for example, that has more debt that the European Union couldn't possibly pay off. It's a sinkhole. But I digress. So we need to have some real logical thinkers, and Carney needs to understand, like a banker that he is, that the wishful thinking ain't going to do it. You really have to be in a situation where your investment returns profits.
Well, I think that's part of the issue too. Is that we're running away from a big trade partner called the United States, who does some things very well. We import a lot of their goods. They take some of our goods, but we still want to go down to the dollar store and pick things up for
cheap.
$1.
Yep.
So now we're going to run off to China and try and maintain a status quo that we've had with the United States by getting things built cheaper. And that's going to hurt us in the long run. We're going to have to realize that, if you want that $1 to $1.25 trinket, it's maybe going to cost us $2 because we have to make it here in Canada, or we have to make it in the United States and pay duties and taxes on it, or we can't keep bringing in cheap labor to do this kind of stuff. No.
And just to close off, because we're nearing the 41-minute mark. You remember back in the days when the first Japanese cars showed up in Canada, and they were cheap and they were pretty poor vehicles. And I remember neighbors of mine who would buy these, and I'd say, and I was a young man at the time, and think, yeah, but what about the people who make the Chryslers and the Fords and the Chevys? And the response was, I don't give a shit, because I'm buying a cheap car. That's not my problem. Well, that thinking over the decades has come back to bite us in the backside, because it is our problem now. And
very much so.
And whether you think deindustrialization or the hope that AI will do all sorts of things to make people wealthy, no.
Well, that, and it goes back to what I said too. If we take that analogy, and the people who built the Chryslers and the Fords and the GM products didn't price themselves out of the market, and did put quality as job one, as they had advertised.
Yes.
Maybe the Toyotas, the Nissans, the Hyundais, the Opels, the BMWs wouldn't be as prevalent.
And would be making a better product, I might add, because in many cases that's precisely how they garnered the market, because people got lazy here, and the foreign manufacturers, particularly in Asia, the Japanese and the North Koreans, the South Koreans. North Koreans don't make cars to export. Just that's a slip of the tongue there. They for many years made much better vehicles than the homegrown stuff because they got lazy at home.
Well, I think anecdotally I'd heard that story about the one Japanese industrialist who made gazillion dollars on something and bought I think it was a Cadillac, because that was supposed to be the best car that North America made at the time. And he had it imported into Japan. And the first thing he did was took it into a factory where they realigned the doors, straightened this, all the lines matched up, the paint was stripped off and redone, because in reality it was maybe a good car, but as far as they could see, it was an unfinished product. And that's where we have fallen down, I think. And that's where we have to kind of get up out of the wheelchair and start getting back to making a good product that's competitive.
Yeah, and it'll take a decade or more. You don't do it
Or
overnight.
more.
It's just like this whole business of the oil that now is going to go from Venezuela into the refineries in Houston or into the critical reserve structure. It's not coming from Alberta. It won't come from Alberta. Tough times are ahead. Carney's right on that, but I don't think he's got the solutions that really will help us.
No, he's got the solutions for a company. I forget what it is.
Starts with the B.
A B. Yeah, I know it starts with the B.
Give me a B. Yeah. All right. Well, for the 11th of January, we're not further ahead than we were for the 1st of January, but what the hell?
Well, it's interesting. Again, we're a third of the way through the month of the brand new year.
Yes, we are.
Time just marches on.
It does. All right. Well, you stay warm and dry on the west coast there.
Yes, in our atmospheric river.
Yeah, we are in the middle of a blizzard here at the moment, but that's normal for the Great Lakes. So.
And I think it's called winter. Yeah.
Winter. That's right. All right. I'll see you next week, Bob. Stay safe. Stay well.
And you too.